Hello, and what is up, everybody? It is me, Nautica Gaming. I am here today not for a live stream, but I want to go over some finer details of how New World damages are calculated and what you guys can do to help out in those fights that seem to be very impossible. So, as always with me, I'm a very organized person, so of course I made a whole Excel sheet and everything. First and foremost, right here on the screen, we see that we've got the enemies laid out, we've got the damage types and everything. Pretty much I guess I'll start with the damage types. So for the damage types in New World, there are 9, with the Void Gauntlet being added relatively recently. There used to be 8. Now there's 9. So you have your slash, your thrust, strike, fire, nature, ice, void, lightning, and arcane damage types. So there are 5 main categories of enemies in the game New World. We have your Ancients, your Angry Earth, your Corrupted, the Lost, and Beast. So just to go into a little bit more detail on that, the Ancients, they're the skeletons, basically. The Angry Earth, they are the, I guess, tree-looking ones, like the Dryads is what you'll typically find them as. They're called Dryads. The Corrupted always have that red freaking aura about them, that red smoke with them. The Lost are pretty much your... they're pretty much washed up enemies, basically. So like you'll have some with the clubs, you'll have some that have swords. A big one is the captains, or like the officers that have like the ship's wheel as a shield with the sword. Those are all the Lost. Beast, straightforward, that's your predators, so like your lynx, your alligator, stuff like that. Now, as far as this goes, this particular sheet, the way I did it, and this is based off of actual New World information, so this is not some made-up crap. This is legit. So I guess the best thing to do is first go through the different weapons as well. So if you're using a sword and shield, the light attack on the sword has the slash attack type. The heavy attack on the sword has the thrust damage type. So keep that in mind. And then as far as the light versus heavy attacks, it's how long you hold down the left mouse button. I'm sure everybody knows that. It's part of the tutorial, so to speak. So the rapier and the spear, the bow and musket. The bow, of course, you need the ammo, so you need to make you need to make arrows. The musket, you need to make cartridges. That's all thrust damage. I use the rapier and life staff as my primary build. I have been working on leveling up the bow and fire staff just for a change of pace because I already maxed out the rapier and musket. So those are your thrust damage types. The slash is only the hatchet and great axe. And then, of course, you have your Warhammer as a strike damage. The Warhammer, as far as I know, the Warhammer is still the best melee weapon you can have. Now, the only problem with that is I believe it's really built for tanks. Of course, that's debatable, obviously, but it's more for like a tank build. If you want to be a tank, you want to have that Warhammer for crowd control and stuff. And then, obviously, your fire, life, ice, and void weapons use that specific type of damage. Very easy. Now, what about the lightning and arcane damage? Easy enough, and we'll go through that again. Not again, but we'll go through that after this. The lightning and arcane damage, that is the damage type that you can only do if you put a gem in your weapon. We'll go over the gems. But first of all, the Ancients. Slash damage does reduced damage. Fire damage does hella reduced damage. Now, lightning is super effective, and so is the strike damage for the Ancients. So if you're coming up on a skeleton, your best bet would be some kind of like Warhammer that uses the strike damage, but also has a topaz gem attached, because you get the lightning and the strike damage, which is a twofer, so to speak. And now it also, void damage is also good. So if you were to use the Void Gauntlet as a secondary, if you're going against ancients rather, totally fine. Do not use the slash weapons or the fire staff to take out the Ancients. Another way to tell this is in the game, if you're doing critical damage, it's going to be a dark orange, and it'll be a very nice number. If you're doing better than typical damage, so like your super effective damage is going to be the dark orange. The relatively decent effective damage, so like your 110, your 115 probably, that's going to show up as a light yellow. If the damage is white, that's going to be all of the 100s that are on this page. So 100 means there's no change. If you're seeing blue, then that means just stop using it. Don't even. So if you see your damage numbers above the enemy coming in through blue, then you're not using the right weapon for the enemy. As far as the Angry Earth, your best bet with them is Fire Slash. So Slash damage is the hatchet and great axe. So what you can do is if you were to put a hatchet or great axe with a ruby gem in it, you're going to get that fire and that slash damage bonus. So the only difference with a lot of these is depending on how you've built your attributes. So a lot of these gems, and on the right side here, increase based on your intelligence attribute. So if you're looking to do like a dual damage type build, you need to get your intelligence attribute up, which kind of sucks because not all these weapons use intelligence. I should probably go over that, and I will have to make another video about the specifics with that, which I will do, no worries. Do not use a topaz gem with any builds if you're going against the Angry Earth. It's not going to end well for you. The thrust damage, so I use the rapier. It's not great, and this is why I also have the fire staff in this case, because the fire staff is the most effective against them. So with my fire staff, it makes the battles with the Angry Earth a lot easier, for me at least. As far as the corrupted, your best bet is arcane and thrust damage. Now for me, I have built a bow specifically because I like to do I like to participate in the invasion. So every once in a while, the corrupted will invade one of your territory's forts, and you don't have to be aligned with that faction to participate. I don't believe. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure anybody can just join a corrupted invasion, like to defend against it. So if that's the case, what I did was I built a bow, and with the bow I put a sapphire gem on it. The sapphire gem gives me that arcane damage, so so the arcane damage helps with that. Plus, I've got the thrust damage, which is inherent to the bow. So the arrows are sending out arcane and thrust damage, which really helps, especially once you hit the higher waves of corrupted enemies, where you're dealing with like level 60, 65s. Now, I'm not particularly accurate with the bow, so if I really wanted to do something smart, then what I would do is I would probably equip like I would probably build a rapier with the sapphire gem, and then have the life staff as my backup. The only problem with the life staff is it uses nature damage, which is decent against the corrupted, as you see here, 115. But it only uses focus. So if my build, the rapier and fire staff build, the rapier uses dexterity and intelligence. The fire staff uses intelligence and I forget what the other thing was, or maybe it's just intelligence. It might be just intelligence. So that's good because then I could focus some on the intelligence part, build that up, so that way I get that bonus and I get the extra effects every 50 points you put into it. So I might do that. I would keep the life staff handy so I can run healing as well. So pretty much I'm not going to have heavy focus on my attributes. I wouldn't put a lot of points into that because if I'm just using it for heals, whatever, like no biggie. Now, of course, if you're looking for different builds, like if you're going for a healer build, you're going to need to put a lot of attribute points into focus. However, the only problem with that is what secondary or what primary can you use with the life staff to kind of cut into that? Like, is there something that uses only one? Like, you might be able to use the Void Gauntlet because the Void Gauntlet, for example, uses intelligence and focus. So if you have a Void Gauntlet and a fire staff, or excuse me, a life staff, you already need the focus for the life staff. You might as well attribute it to the Void Gauntlet as well. And then you've got the intelligence. So if you used intelligence and put a lot of points into the intelligence attributes, then you're also going to get those increased damage if you're equipping gems because most of them scale with intelligence. So these are things to think about. So your best bet would be arcane and any thrust weapon and nature. Nature is the type of weapon that comes from the life staff. So it's not like life damage, it's nature damage, totally same thing. As far as the Lost, which are all those pirates that washed up on shore, your best bet with them is nature and ice. So if we're going to go back to the life staff, you could also throw in an ice gauntlet with that too. But your life staff is going to be the best against them on its own, especially if you're going to do a life staff Void Gauntlet thing. You already need the focus and you already have the intelligence, like I said, to scale up with your gem if you're equipping a gem. So that would be an option. You can do well with strike damage, so if you want to put a Warhammer with your life staff, you could do that. You're not going to do well with thrust damage, so my rapier is not super great. And do not use the Void Gauntlet with the Lost because then you're just lost. So your best bet is life staff with no gem attachments for the lost. Now, the other thing too is it all depends on where you're going. So like, am I saying make all these different builds? No, there's probably like a very well-rounded build that you can do. Like for me, my rapier does very good work. I need to build one though that has the sapphire damage, or excuse me, sapphire gem attached to it, so I can do better in the corrupted invasions. Other than that, I mean, Arcane is really bad against is really bad against nothing. So it doesn't change the other enemies that I'm facing. It's just very helpful with the corrupted. So if I'm putting a sapphire gem on my rapier, which also gives me that thrust damage, that's going to do very well in these invasions. Or if you're going into a corrupted, I guess, stronghold, for example. There's plenty of elite strongholds on the map that have corrupted enemies. So you're definitely going to want to do something like that, because the arcane damage is the best for them, followed closely by thrust damage, which is your rapier by default. So plenty of options there. Now with beast damage, thrust damage is the best. So my bow does very good work against them. So does the rapier. And the other thing too is if I'm putting a sapphire gem to get that arcane damage for the corrupted, it's going to do typical damage against beasts. It's going to do typical damage against everything else. The main thing, this is why I very much like the rapier, because I can put a sapphire gem in there and now boom, I have the arcane damage, plus I have the basic thrust damage. Thrust damage is only meh against Angry Earth and Lost, which is where you kind of think like, okay, well, what can I put there instead? Like you can do fire, and that's why I've got the fire staff out as well, because fire is awesome against Angry Earth, and it's no effect on the Lost. So like with this chart, you have to kind of like see, so if you're looking for the one build that will take on whatever enemies you're facing, I do recommend rapier and fire staff because it does great work. You have no downfalls with, I mean, the ancients, sure, but the difference too, like if you're using the rapier, because it's got thrust damage, there's no effect on the ancients, and you're not going to lose damage. Don't use the fire staff because that's the worst you can use against them. With the Angry Earth and Lost, since you do lose a little bit of damage from thrust there, if you're equipping the sapphire gem into it, then boom, you have arcane damage, and that's no change. If you're looking to be, and then with Angry Earth 2, the fire staff makes up for that issue with the thrust damage. So really the only issue you're running into is against the Lost, and you could very easily, if you'd rather put in an amber gem, that will give you the nature boost against the Lost, which is also good against the corrupted. So it really all depends. I mean, you can do a lot with the different weapons that are there, but I recommend rapier life staff. Put a sapphire gem on the rapier because arcane is super effective against corrupted and has no effect against any other enemies. No adverse effect, I should say, against the other enemies. So that's what I would say is your best bet. So that's just my little takeaway from these damages. So I mean, absolutely screen grab this if it helps you. Awesome. If not, it's okay. I mean, I'm just figuring I'll put some stuff out there for you guys. Now, as far as the gems, here we go. You know what? Let me just move this down a touch, so that way my camera, there we go. All right. That way the camera is not in the way. All right, cool. So there are 14 gems that you can put in this game. We've already talked about a few. An amber gem. And as far as gems go, your stone crafting or stone cutting skill rather is very important for this. You're going to want eventually to find your pristine gems. So like the best thing, like if you're going to make something that puts, if you're going to put a sapphire gem on your rapier, you want that stone cutting skill to be high, and you want that outfitting skill to be high too. And you also need to find a town that has a very good outfitting station tier. I think you need tier 4 or 5 to use the pristine gems and equip them. So, oh no, excuse me, you don't need that at all. What am I saying? You only need like a strong stone cutting table in town to make these gems. You equip them based on, like after you cut them, basically. So, and unless I've got that wrong, although I think the outfitting the outfitting station is where you put rings, amulets, and earrings. So if you're just looking to put a gem on a weapon or a piece of armor, all you need is a stone cutting table. And then I think you need a tier 4 or 5 to actually use the pristines. Pristines are epic. They are purple, and they have tier 5. Now, as far as the tiers go, as it shows down here on the bottom. Wait, no, we're this way. On the bottom, it shows that tiers 1 through 4 are based on the gemstone rarity. So if you're looking at the pristine gems, that's the way to go with if you have the purple ones. Those are your best ones. So you'll get the tier 4, and its percentage is scaling off of the tier of rarity. So if you want a very solid build for your rapier, you want a cut pristine sapphire, and you want to put that onto your rapier, so that way you get a very nice percentage of damage that's converted from thrust into arcane, and that's how that works. And you need death motes, you need death quintessence if you're trying to do a cut pristine sapphire or cut pristine anything. The pristine ones are always going to be quintessence. So basically you also need a very good, very high arcane repository skill, so and a good arcane repository tier. But usually in most towns you're finding tier 3 plus, because everybody knows how important the arcane is in the game from what I've seen. So if we're gonna stick with our sapphire, like say I find sapphires when I'm mining just out, if I'm going through orichalcum ore, if I'm mining star metal or platinum or whatever, I can find sapphires. I can also buy them on the trading post. I mean, if you're buying the basic stuff on trading post, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you're trying to buy, say, a cut pristine sapphire. That's probably going to run you a lot of gold. Towards endgame, it doesn't matter. You have plenty of cash, so you can do it. But while you're waiting for that thing to happen, your best bet is to get like basic sapphires, get like basic death motes, because then the motes turn into wisps, those turn into essences, and those turn into quintessences based on your repository, your arcane skill. So there's a lot that goes into it. And then, of course, you don't even want to talk about, like, if you're building a rapier from scratch. Like, if you're trying to build an orichalcum rapier, for example. Orichalcum is the best ore that you can find. It can be converted into cinnabar and tolvium, I believe. And those are, like, the best that you can get. So if you're building your own weapons, you need those huge... you need a lot of orichalcum ore, because it takes 250 orichalcum ore to build. You know what? I'm actually going to look this up because I was curious. Where is that, though? That is that? Well, I guess it would be the smelter, yeah. Okay, so cinnabar and asmodium. Okay, so asmodium is okay. So if you have a lot of orichalcum, that will give you cinnabar, that will give you tolvium. So I had that right. If you have cinnabar and tolvium, since that uses 250 orichalcum ore each only, cool. But your smelting skill needs to be 200 before you can do that. Now, if you were to do that, you'll get the orichalcum ingots, which, or you'll get asmodium, which is putting tolvium and cinnabar and obsidian flux and charcoal together. So you're going to need a lot of asmodium to do this. So you're really going to spend a lot of time in Shattered Mountain. You're going to spend a lot of time in, is it Eden Grove, I think, that is also far up north there, and there's like a big corrupted mine that you can find a bunch of orichalcum ore at. So this is what you need for, this is what you need to like build the best tier quality items. However, everything has to be skill 200. That's a grind. New World is a grind. Like, there's no doubt about that. But going back to the gems, let's go through this real quick. Amber gives you nature damage based off of focus. So how if equipped to weapons. Now, there's another thing, too, with gems. If you're going to equip them to weapons, you're going to get an offensive perk. If you equip them to armor, you're going to get a defensive perk. So Amber converts a certain percentage, depending on the tier of gem, converts a certain percentage of whatever your primary weapon damage is into nature, using your focus attribute is how that works. The same applies to the nature resistance. It will increase your damage, increase your damage absorption against nature damage if you were to do that, if you were to put it on armor. So that's Amber. And then I put on the right side the weapon perk and the armor perk names and the elements that it needs. Amethyst, basically the same thing as Amber. However, it changes a certain percentage of your weapon damage into void based on intelligence. And you'll see a lot of, like, INT is going to be intelligence. Nature damage is the only thing that uses focus, which makes sense. Your life staff uses focus, so of course nature damage would also. Amethyst gives you void damage conversion, also resistance the same. Aquamarine, ice same thing based off of intelligence and resistance 2. Carnelian, if you put it on your weapons, you're going to increase your threat, which means enemies are going to aggro onto you more. If you're putting it on armor, you're going to have calming, which is like they're not going to really come after you too much. If you are playing solo, obviously, if you're in the upper tier, upper echelon of towns, cities, villages, whatever, then enemies are just going to come after you anyway. But if you are doing a group thing and you don't want to be a tank, you want to be just like a healer, then maybe think about putting a Carnelian on some armor. And you have 5 pieces of armor to choose from. You've got your headgear, you've got your chest gear, your gloves, your legs, and your feet. So if you were to put 5 cut pristine Carnelians onto all of those, you're going to see a huge decrease in the threat you generate. And I think it's like 5. I could be wrong. I'm just guessing because I haven't really seen a lot. If it's even like 5% threat decrease, if it's on armor, that's 25% because now it's on all 5 of your clothing items. Just thought. Diamond, now this is where it gets interesting. So before I do that, let me go over Ruby, which is the fire damage, which same thing as like your void and ice damage. You'll get a certain amount of that based on intelligence converted to fire. Sapphire is going to be the arcane. That's what I've talked about a lot. Topaz is lightning. The only reason to put lightning on it is if you're just farming ancient kills. There's really no value to it, in my opinion. But, people will sell it on the trading post. People will buy it. The thing is, you can always change your gems too. So whatever gem you have attached to your armor or your weapon, you can always change it if you get something different. So there's that. Diamond, so if we're going back up a bit, diamond increases your damage if you have full HP. And that is if it's equipped to weapons. If it's equipped to armor, you're going to see elemental and physical resistance favoring the physical. So that means strike, thrust, and slash. You're going to have a better resistance to those and some to elemental. So like your fire, arcane, lightning, void, ice, and nature. If you're putting an emerald on there, then you're going to boost your damage if the enemy has low HP. So if you're in a group, say, or there's just 2 people, and one of them, one of those people is a tank, and they're doing a lot of damage to this one enemy, especially in expeditions, and the enemy gets down to like 25-30% health, now you've got your emerald-equipped weapons. You're going to do a lot more damage to that enemy rather than like if you're trying to take them out from the start. It also gives you resistance to thrust damage, and there's a lot of that too, because you've got the Angry Earth that uses bows, you've got swords, which is, I guess, slash. But like, it all depends on what you like. All around, honestly, for a weapon, I would stick with Sapphire. For the armor, I guess you could do. I guess depending on what you can do diamond or malachite. Really, it all depends. Or if you really want to like stay under the radar, throw some carnelian on your armor. That could be. Jasper gems increase damage after you take 3 hits. So if you're getting hit 3 times, like this brings to mind like Angry Earth. So like if you're going up against a Dryad archer, typically they start with like a 3-arrow attack. So if you're getting hit 3 times and you have a Jasper item equipped or a Jasper M equipped to your weapons, you're going to do a lot more damage to them now. Sweet. It also gives you resistance to strike damage if it's on your armor. Malachite, increased damage of crowd control effects. So this is perfect for like the Great Axe or the Warhammer because there's a lot of crowd control builds you can make with those. So Malachite will help you with that. Now it also, if you put it on armor, it gives you that elemental physical resistance favoring the elemental side as opposed to diamond, which favors the physical damage side. If you're putting Moonstone on it, you're going to just increase damage if you're at low HP. So if you're taking heavy damage, you're at low HP, you want to take out these enemies quickly, Moonstone helps with that. Also gives you slash resistance if it's on your armor. I can't see that being super helpful, to be honest, because, unless you're in a group, I suppose maybe, but that's up to you. Onyx Gem, it increases your damage against an enemy that has full HP. So that's always nice. And then it gives you general physical resistance. Opal increases damage if you have low stamina. So if you're doing a lot of dodging and now you don't have a lot of stamina, throwing an opal gem on your weapon will help with boosting damage to that. Now the only problem here is stamina tends to regen quickly. So unless you're like dodging quite often, then you're going to run into an issue where you don't have very low stamina. So it might not be super helpful. Now, if you put it on armor, you're going to have general elemental resistance, which is nice. Ruby, like we said, fire, sapphire, arcane, topaz, lightning. On the right side, I give you the weapon perk name and the armor perk name. So this is the stuff that you want to look at for like if you're seeing something on the trading post, then and you see that there's a gem attached for when you have this, like this is an actual spreadsheet that tells you exactly what it is. So that's good. But if you're not sure, if you don't have this handy, if you see, like, say somebody selling gold chest plate and it has physical ward perk, then it's like, okay, well, that's going to be onyx. So they put onyx on the armor. Totally fine. Look, do what you got to do. I think overall defensively, probably a combination of onyx and opal, because you're going to deal with a lot more physical attacks than elemental. Elemental attacks will be very prevalent in expeditions from what I've seen. So maybe think about having 2 sets of gear. And I'll do another video where I go over all the perks and stuff, so don't you worry about that. But like if you are, like say you have a decent set of gear, like if you have light, I mean if you're doing expeditions you probably want medium or heavy, honestly, unless you have like 2 tanks and like 2 heals and you're just like there for DPS. But if you're a DPS player, you're gonna want like heavy armor, I would say. If you're a healer, I guess it really doesn't matter. You probably want to dodge. You probably want to throw some Carnelian on your armor, so that way in expeditions they're not going to aggro on you, because if you do heal, then you're going to get aggro from the enemies, whereas if you have Carnelian, it might not be as bad. That's the only thing. So generally speaking, from a perspective of if I'm looking to be defensive, then I probably want to throw on some onyx on, say, well, I guess you can do, if you're just doing like PvE stuff, just playing through the regular game like solo, throw on some physical resistance, throw on some onyx on all 5 of your gear, so that way you have the physical resistance. And then if you are, and then like I said, throw some sapphire on your rapier, or do something with the fire staff if you want it. That's totally up to you. Offensively, I like the sapphire. I do also like the enemy at full HP onyx for offensive, but the thing is too, with a lot of these skill trees in the weapons, you can find passives that like increase damage against full HP enemies. So if you're throwing an onyx on one of your weapons and you have all of those, if enemies at full HP deal such and such % amount more damage, I mean, maybe it's a quicker battle. It all depends. I mean, that's the thing with this game that I very much like about it. There's so many weapon choices. There's so many damage types. There's so many ways you can kit out your gear. I mean, you have 5 pieces of armor to play with, and you have 9 weapons to play with. Go crazy. See what works for you. I recommend rapier, life staff. Throw a sapphire on the rapier. And then for the life staff, I mean, I don't know. I suppose you can throw an amber on there. Get that nature boost, because nobody's resistant to nature. Maybe. But yeah, I mean, it all depends on what you want to do. I mean, like if you're going against elite enemies solo, you might want to also think about throwing the physical resistance stuff on there. So throwing onyx on your armor, maybe that makes your life last longer. Who knows? But that is going to be everything that I have. If there are any questions, certainly let me know. You can throw some comments in underneath the video. No problem. We got this. And I will be back with another video that goes into a little bit more detail on perks. I'll go into a little bit more detail on the weapon-specific items. So stay tuned to this channel. If you do like what you see, hit that subscribe, hit that bell, and that's going to do it for me. Hopefully we'll see you at the next one. Until next time, Nautica Gaming out.